It's a story about a people who won't be defined by genocide, but by the land they steward, the culture they preserve, and the resilience they represent. As part of their master plan for Beachfront Park, the city of Crescent City has collaborated with the Portland-based landscape architecture firm GreenWorks and civil engineering firm Stover Engineering, along with the Tolowa Nation, Tolowa Dee-ni Nation, Elk Valley Rancheria, and Del Norte Historical Society to develop the Tolowa Cultural Trail. This self-guided interpretive walk will lead visitors through 10,000 years of Tolowa history, culture, and language. The trail is currently in Phase 1 of construction, with its initial features having been installed earlier this year. This phase includes the trail's welcome station and first 3 nodes. Bridget Lacey, the city's Grants and Economic Development Manager, spoke with Redwood Voice about how the trail project came to be, the cultural committee formed for the project, and the grants secured that would make it a reality.
So this project started with a Prop 68 grant for the Beachfront Park. This was back in I think 2018. We initially wanted to apply, but they required a significant amount of public outreach to be competitive for the grant. So we passed on the first year and went and got another grant to do more meaningful public engagement through a Cal Endowment grant. And along with the planning for the park, we took a deeper dive. We started, instead of just expecting people to come to council meetings to give their input on the design process, we started actually going more to where people were. We looked at a true cross-section of community members. We kind of made a list. Went to seniors, youth, hospitality, industry professionals, and part of that was also going to the tribes, getting their input directly on the projects that we were working on. And so with that, telling the Tolowa story on Tolowa land in Beachfront Park became a project that rose to the top of the list and became part of our grant application. Then when the project was successful and we assembled a Tolowa Cultural Committee to start that design process, quickly the project kind of snowballed once we got designers involved and landscape architects and Tolowa Cultural Committee, which consists of members from all 3 Tolowa tribes, both federally recognized and not.
Thanks to another grant from the California Coastal Conservancy through its Coastal Stories grant program, PBS SoCal produced 10 short films on the Tolowa, which will be viewable by scanning the QR codes on informational panels along the trail.
This just seemed like a perfect fit for the project we were already working on. What we initially thought would be just a few small kiosks in the park telling the Tolowa story and a botanical garden became much bigger. So with the Coastal Stories grant, the thought was, because the Tolowa tribe is rooted in an oral-based tradition, what better way to present the story and preserve it than with video? So that grant allowed us to do the video work, which is linked to QR codes. And then with that, we realized that became more inspired by the stories being told in the videos and decided that having these big public art features to house the videos was important, and got another grant through the California Art and Parks grant program to do that work. These also will hold interpretive panels with additional complementary information that also is inspired by the videos and the public art features. So it just grew and grew, and 8 grants later, we finally have a project.
Bridget also shared what each node in Phase 1 will cover, and the thought process behind their designs.
The first node is the welcome station. So that's where you're going to walk across a mosaic of 10,000 pebbles as you approach the welcome station. And then when you get to the center, you'll be able to read what that represents. And it represents the population of Tolowa people pre-contact. And then as you leave, there's going to be 504 pebbles that represent the population after contact. So that kind of sets the tone for the rest of the trail. It's going to show you where all of the other nodes are, and just a little bit about what the project is and how it came to be. So we're standing in the redwood tree node, which the ground has the rings of the tree embedded in the concrete. And this is really about the timeline of Tolowa history. So we will have a panel that kind of wraps around that is the actual timeline. You would then go to the bird and basket node, which will be where the botanical garden is, and it kind of represents the gathering of medicinal herbs, different plants that were used to create baskets. The third node that's been installed so far is the canoe node, and that will be about trade, and also that node has binoculars, which are going to be really fun because you can actually see the places in the stories that are being referred to. So this area over here was an Indian village right off Elk Creek. You'll be able to see where the prayer rock was destroyed and turned into the jetty. You'll be able to point to a lot of different places in the park where this history happened. And then we got another grant from the Mellon Foundation for $2 million that's going to take us through to the end, because really one of the most important areas is at Battery Point. That was a village site, and we want to make that place feel like it was meant to tell those stories there. And so that'll come with a redesign of the parking lot and getting that just right so that it feels like those stories they have their place there.
Redwood Voice had the opportunity to speak with two members of the project's cultural committee, Lauren Melashne Bamalin and Charlene Latayana Storr. Lauren is a member of the federally recognized Tolowa Dee-ni Nation, and Charlene is of the federally unrecognized Tolowa Nation.
When the funding came available to the city on this big project redevelopment down here, there was some money made available that they had gained to tell an untold story of their community. And they chose to tell the Tolowa story. And then they were looking for, participants from the community, stakeholders, those kinds of, situations. And so they looked to the Historical Society, and of course they asked me to come and participate in this. And of course I really wanted to do it because this is my history as well. I think what I, helped bring to the project is a lot of history, and of course, being a linguist, I give a lot of linguistic data. So I've done a lot of work like that in my entire life. That's what I got my master's degree in, is linguistics.
I am a genealogist, a historian. I do whatever I can. The way I was raised, I support my community in any way I can.
So what's your role in the committee?
Providing and documenting and researching the facts that we have versus facts that are not or might be out in public someplace, but we're finding that most of the time it's not really documented and no one learns in school about us, other than that they know there are Indians around. It started out as the city wanted to do it just for the city, but they didn't realize that we didn't have just all of our villages in one place. Our villages were scattered throughout Del Norte, but we have several sites around here and several things that we would like to share with people who live here and people who visit us to learn about us. And this is, to me, it's a wonderful project.
Charlene spoke on the history of Euro-American colonization in the mid-1800s and how many tribes in California, like the Tolowa Nation, remained unrecognized.
If you know anything about our federal government history, colonization started here in 1849 when the gold rush started in California. The United States purchased California from Mexico on February 2nd, 1848. But since colonization and the rural area that we're located in, and people coming in by the thousands to look for gold, which most of them were not successful at, the federal government went through and did treaties that were never ratified. They were signed but never ratified. So they never had to pay for anything that they took from us, the land, the food, the whatever we had at that time. And then we were not recognized, and then they started doing a census and all of this stuff trying to find all the Indians in the area.
Yep.
And we got down to, by 1900, our population, which had been in the thousands, got down to a little over 100 left. So now we're back up into the low thousands, but the federal government has not recognized or terminated and unterminated, terminated and unterminated, did census, did rolls, did whatever over the years and stuff. So finally they determined that California Indians from who are descendants of the 1928 rolls were California Indians, because California never had one tribe. So when they did this last allotment assignment for what they called Smith River Rancheria at the time, the senator that was in charge received a letter from Congress stating that any Indians who owned private land were not eligible for an allotment. They were created for homeless Indians. So that's how we were left out. Most of us in Tolowa Nation are people who are descendants of private property owners. Which is why we were left off the reservations or Rancheria project and not recognized by the federal government, because they only recognize the reservation and rancherias that they created, not us, that the government created. So we were left off because we owned private land. So then all the Tolowas got together and we figured out, what are we going to do? The federal government needs to stand up to their responsibilities, pay us for the land that they took from us, you know, this whole thing. So we formed Tolowa Nation.
One of the arching tenets that I really wanted to cover in this project, if possible, with the city is that time didn't begin here in 1853.
Yes, right.
It began with, in our case, Genesis. Mm-hmm. So we have a Genesis account. And I want to talk about that 10,000 plus. I mean, I say 10,000 meaning that part of human development era. Mm-hmm. And there, you know, we've been here all through that period.
Right.
You know, and so we didn't want to, I want to be very clear that we didn't start with, you know, the arrival of the Americans. Yeah.
According to Bridget, this is the first time the city and tribes have collaborated on a project of this scale. And it's the first time the story of the Tolowa has been presented in this way. Everyone involved was committed to making sure this was done right.
Well, this was a long process. It's been, like I said, since 2019 for me. You know, one of the challenges is getting it right. I mean, that was something we didn't want to, you know, we made a promise to the people working on this project that this was going to be, this is not going to be sugar-coated, this is going to be their story. And so, you know, we had to be careful to make sure that we got this right and that it wasn't, you know, something that we had too much of a hand in. We let the cultural committee be the designers. They voted on everything. But also I think with the funding issues that we had as it grew and grew, some of that became tricky, I guess, trying to make it all work. I mean, we did it, but that there were some places that we thought, you know, we want to do it right. This is a kind of a big deal. We haven't done something like this before. We wanted to make sure it was done well, and we didn't want to have to, you know, cut back on anything. So, and especially once we were able to gain the trust of the people we were working with, we didn't want to get it, you know, we wanted to get it right.
This is, to me, is the first huge history of Tolowa from the past to present. And this is it's Elk Valley, which is Tolowa Yurok members, Tolowa Dee-ni Nation, which is all Tolowa, and Tolowa Nation, which are all Tolowa, have really worked together on a project this big. And it's worked out really, really well, and all of us have learned from each other, because not one of us knows everything. We all learn something somewhere, somehow, sometime. And it's hard to know everything. You can't. There's no way. But
That's why you have a team.
Yes, a team working together to do that. So we just do a lot of things, and it's really getting the word out to people that Indians are still here. We're all a part of the United States, the North American, South American continent, basically.
To see, it's interesting that something is shifting in a positive way about knowledge or exposure, or for them to even broach the subject upon their own volition. All of that is exciting to me and interesting. And so when they first got the committee together, I was asked, I said, well, I'm going to ask you one question here. I said, is this going to be a project to make everything look shiny and pretty, and it's going to be a whitewashing of our history?
Mm-hmm.
And the city manager said, no, this is not going to be that. And I said, because if it was going to be a whitewashing, it's all beautiful and pretty, and that was unfortunate, but we're here today and forget about it. Then I'm going home, I'm busy, I have a lot of stuff to do, and I don't want to be a part of that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been proven to me so far that that's not the case, and that they've held steady to that commitment, and they're learning as well, and well, we all are. We're learning back and forth, and I think that's part of the dynamic, is the back and forth learning, and so forth. So I think, that may be putting it all into a nutshell.
I hope this can be a place for Tolowa people to come and celebrate their heritage, but also for visitors that are not Tolowa. We're hopeful that some of the lessons of being good stewards of the land and things like that resonate for people, and can be applied to like when tourists come here to see the redwoods and the parks, just things to consider when you are viewing those things in this place that we all call home.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's a lot of great lessons to be learned.
I hope it inspires everyone to wherever they're from or wherever they go next to learn about the people from that area. I do that when I travel. I try to find out more about the Indians from that area, what they ate and what they gathered, as opposed to so I learned up and down the whole west coast here, almost all of us have the same plants going up and down the coast. Each area has about the same plants, so learning how they prepare them and how they use them is wonderful, because we used our plants in a certain way, but somebody else might have used that plant for something else. So when everyone that comes here, I hope they learn. And everyone always says, oh, you have such a rich history and you know your history. Well, yes, I do, but you would have too if you go back and check your family. And you check where your people came from and what they did. So when you learn about your family, it makes you so proud of who you are. So you need to know who you are, and coming here and maybe learning this and maybe going back and learning about your family or your history. It's wonderful. It's wonderful. That's where I get my good feelings from. That's what makes me want to keep on living, is to keep learning.
The grand opening for Phase 1 of the Tolowa Cultural Trail is set for fall 2026. Now that the 4 main features have been installed, the city is just waiting on the interpretive panels and final art installations. Soon, the community, tribal members, and visitors alike will be able to learn about the unvarnished history of the Tolowa people through this new experience.